I'm Peter Chan, and I'm a bonsai practitioner, and I'm the founder and CEO of Herons Bonsai Nursery, which has been going for the last 34 years, and we are the largest bonsai nursery in the UK. But I've been growing bonsai for about 55 years, self-taught, and just making an honest living from bonsai. Our first home was a brand new flat with a huge balcony in southeast London in Eltham. And in that balcony, everything we grew had to be grown in pots. So I started growing plants in pots. But at the same time, I was very interested in the modern studio pottery movement started by Bernard Leach and all these great British potters of the 60s. And I was dabbling in ceramics myself, making ceramics just as a hobby in evening classes. In those days, there were a lot of evening classes run by adult education centers. And while making pots, I said to myself, why don't I make some of these shallow flower pots that I see in Chinese pictures, you know, showing bonsai trees. So I made these little shallow dishes and planted little shrubs in them. And I experimented with those shrubs, and that's how I experimented with bonsai. And most of my bonsai is really self-taught because I've been experimenting with trees. I don't claim to have been trained in China or Japan, but I'm very proud that I've learned and figured out how to do bonsai that are pleasing to the eye and which passes off as bonsai. The history of bonsai goes back thousands of years. I would say at least 2,000 years. The ancient Chinese, their civilization, as you know, dates back to several thousands of years. And apart from making ceramics, the Chinese have always had a deep love for plants, especially flowering plants. So they cultivated flowering plants, camellias, chrysanthemums, you name it, they pioneered it and bred different types of plants. And to this very day, all the garden plants in the Western world, anything with sinensis or chinensis at the end of the botanical name comes from China, like your camellias, forsythia, all the rhododendrons, plants like this all came from China. So the Chinese have been growing plants for thousands of years. And at the same time, the Chinese have developed ceramics gone also over thousands of years. And in the course of making ceramics, they happened to make plant pots, flower pots. And the two fused together, putting plants in pots, and then it developed into making artistic plants, not just letting plants grow in any old fashion, but they actually shaped the plants. And that's how the shapes of the plants came to be developed into bonsai. To this very day, the Chinese call bonsai as we know it, penjing or potted scenery or punchoi, that means potted plants, but they are artistic pot plants. So that is how bonsai evolved. I also have my own theory as to how bonsai started. In the ancient days, when people went to the countryside and saw beautiful scenery, mountain scenery with little trees growing on the mountains and hills and on the cliffs, just as you would go out and take pictures with your camera and record these beautiful views to enjoy later on, I like to think that the Chinese, when they went back home, they tried to recreate these pictures and images on a small scale in their own backyard. So they built a little rockery and planted small plants in them. Because to this very day, there's a Chinese art called seksan. That means sek is stone or mountain, and the san is the mountain. So stone mountains. And when they make the seksan, they plant little trees in it. So they have a little pond and a small mountain. So this is a dwarf three-dimensional scenery of living plants and living things. They put a little bit of water for goldfish to live in the pond. So this is how the miniaturization became to be practiced as a hobby and an art form. So all these different facets of Chinese civilization and the tradition of growing plants and ceramics fused together and evolved as bonsai as we know it today. I think the excitement comes from living each day as a new day, a different day. The plant's always growing, you need to deal with it and see to it. Nothing is ever static, and that's the beauty of growing plants. If it was a static piece of art, like buying a painting, once you've seen it, you do get bored of it, you can't do anything with it. But with bonsai, because it's growing, you've got to keep tending it, otherwise it gets out of control. A tree can get sick, you've got to deal with it and make it well again. So because it's a living thing, that's why bonsai is more interesting than many other forms of art, like even ceramics or sculpture. Once you've made it, you've made it. You can just keep handling it and looking at it, but the feeling of something growing, something which you have to tend to and see to, is quite different from other art forms. That is why bonsai is so interesting. Part of the enjoyment of making YouTube videos is that I'm giving pleasure to a lot of people in a different way. And I like to give because I feel that most of these art forms and interests should not be kept secret. I know people have to make a living and have to keep certain secrets and things to themselves, but I don't see the point in this. I find that as I've aged, I find that everyone has someone to teach others. No one has the monopoly of wisdom. What you do is your way of doing it, and it works for you. It may not work for everyone else, but they would like to experiment with what you did. So I respect what other people do, and that's it. You can try their ways and you can try my way and experiment with it and then evolve your own way. So this is how I approach bonsai now. I'm a great believer in sharing this knowledge to the entire world through this digital media. So long may it continue.